The clock has started. Yes, sir. Reading it loud and clear.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Discovery, roger, there, Brahma.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and welcome to the March 27, 2019 edition of Space News. This is Peter Aylward, and I have Tina Stagg and Michael Abdullah with me from the Space Association. And once again, we'll be starting with some Australian space news. Australia's space industry rockets ahead. The Australian Government is strengthening Australia's space sector with $12 million in new funding initiatives announced last week. Our Mission Control Centre will receive $6 million in funding, and an additional $6 million will go towards establishing a Space Discovery Centre, both in Adelaide, the home of the Australian Space Agency. The Mission Control Centre will be the focal point for space missions in Australia, providing facilities to control small satellite missions, enabling real-time control and testing, and the accelerated development of Australian satellite technology. It will be available for use by space startups and small to medium enterprise space businesses, as well as research and educational institutions from across Australia. The Space Discovery Centre will provide STEM education, engagement and inspiration for young Australians, as well as activities such as mission simulation and training for tertiary education. Both the Mission Control Centre and the Space Discovery Centre are being built with support and in collaboration with the South Australian Government. And more news, the New South Wales space sector is to be boosted with the development of a new space manufacturing capability and the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between the Australian Space Agency and the New South Wales Government. To kickstart momentum under the MOU, the Australian Government is investing $2 million to support world-class space manufacturing capability at the Western Sydney Aerotropolis to boost and transform the local and national space industry. The Australian Space Agency will work with the New South Wales Government on the design and development of infrastructure for the Aerotropolis for startups, SMEs and researchers to deliver future space manufacturing capability. The Australian Space Agency head Dr. Megan Clark said the agreement and facilities will help grow and develop our national space industry. The Aerotropolis project will be undertaken in partnership with the New South Wales Government, which will also contribute funding. The Australian Space Agency is partnering with the states and territories to grow national space sector, and more MOUs are expected to follow. Australia has taken another important step in building its space capabilities with the establishment of a new research facility at the University of Southern Queensland. The Institute for Advanced Engineering and Space Sciences in Toowoomba and Mount Kent Observatory will focus on hypersonic propulsion systems, advanced materials and astrophysics. Opening the institute in Toowoomba last week, the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology, Karen Andrews, said it would complement the work of the Australian Space Agency. The institute will help other space efforts by focusing on cutting-edge technology and world-class infrastructure, Minister Andrews said. The University of Southern Queensland has an impressive space program with its Mount Kent Observatory, providing the only ground-based support in the Southern Hemisphere for NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite, part of a groundbreaking program searching for exoplanets circling nearby stars. Apart from NASA, the university also has agreements with a range of international organisations, including the German and Japanese Space Agency. Wow, a lot of Australian space news there. Over to Tina.
Thanks, Peter, and good evening, space fans. Turning to US space policy, the next meeting of the National Space Council will push NASA to accelerate its human lunar exploration plans. Scott Pace, Executive Secretary of the Council, said at a luncheon last week that human spaceflight in particular needs a greater sense of urgency that will likely be expressed by US Vice President Mike Pence, who chairs the Council, at Tuesday's meeting in Huntsville. Pace noted both NASA's ongoing study of commercial launch options for the EM-1 mission to keep it on schedule for a mid-2020 launch, as well as efforts to accelerate work on SLS so that vehicle could be ready to launch that mission next year. The work, Pace said, includes alternatives to the green run static fire test of the SLS core stage that industry sources say could mean skipping the test entirely, saving months from the current schedule. In NASA planetary and space science missions, engineers are still studying why a probe on NASA's InSight Mars lander is stuck just below the surface. The mole of the heat and physical properties package is designed to burrow as deep as 5 metres below the surface, but is stuck at about 30 centimetres deep. The principal investigator for the instrument said at a conference last week that the mole likely was deflected by a rock just below the surface, then ran into another rock or harder layer of regolith that is preventing it from going deeper. Mission leaders expect to resume efforts to burrow into the surface in a few weeks. The spacecraft's other major instrument, a seismometer, is working well, although there have not yet been any Marsquakes for it to study. To the surprise of scientists, a NASA spacecraft has found that asteroid Bennu is ejecting material. Images from the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft orbiting Bennu detected small particles being ejected from the asteroid. Some material escapes the asteroid entirely, while other particles briefly go into orbit before falling back to its surface. Scientists said they don't know what's causing the particle ejection, but said the activity doesn't pose a risk to the spacecraft. OSIRIS-REx is designed to touch down on the surface of Bennu to collect samples for return to Earth, a task project managers said will be harder than previously expected because the surface is filled with boulders larger than anticipated. Similar conditions on the astronaut Ryugu have led the Japanese space agency JAXA to revise its sample collection plans for its Hayabusa 2 spacecraft. NASA confirmed last week that the Mars 2020 rover mission is suffering cost overruns. The rover mission, just 16 months from launch, is experiencing problems with 2 of its instruments and the system that will cache samples for later return to Earth. NASA didn't specify the exact amount of the overrun, but said it is less than 15% of its previously confirmed cost of $2.4 billion. At a planetary science conference, NASA officials said the agency will look to cover the overrun by seeking efficiencies within the mission itself and reductions from elsewhere in the Mars program to minimise the effect on the overall portfolio of planetary science missions. NASA also defended a decision announced earlier this month to remove a magnometer instrument from the Europa Clipper mission, saying the decision was based not just on growing costs, but other risks in the instrument's design. The 2 lobes of the Kuiper Belt object visited by New Horizons may have gently come together. Scientists studying images and other data of 2014 MU69, nicknamed Ultima Thule, think that this contact binary, formed when 2 bodies orbiting each other, gradually came together. One of the lobes shows signs that it formed from several distinct smaller bodies. The spacecraft will continue to return data collected during the New Year's Day flyby through next summer. To Michael.
Thank you, Tina. And moving to Germany. Germany's space agency is studying a new way to recover and reuse rocket stages. The German space agency DLR received a $3 million grant from the European Commission for a project called Formation Flight for In-Air Launcher First Stage Capturing Demonstration, or FALCON. The study will examine the feasibility of recovering first stages using wings that glide back toward the Earth after launch. Rather than directly landing back on a runway, though, the stage would be captured in the air by a tether from another aircraft, which would then tow it back to the ground. A rough roadmap for the project would allow the technology to be incorporated in a next-generation reusable launch vehicle by the mid-2030s. And moving on to Russian news. Roscosmos will support work to adapt the Soyuz 5 rocket for use by Sea Launch. S7 Space, the new owner of Sea Launch, had previously expressed an interest in using a reusable version of the Soyuz 5 for its ocean-going launch platform, and Roscosmos will provide unspecified support for the development of that version. It's unclear when the Soyuz 5 will be ready for sea launch, with the first land-based version of the rocket not expected to fly until at least 2021. Sea Launch has stated it will resume launches using the same Zenit 3SL rocket previously used by the system, but has not given a firm date for those launches. Now let's look at some Indian space news. India's next Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, or PSLV, mission is now scheduled for launch on April 1. The mission, which will place nearly 30 satellites into 3 orbits, was delayed from March 21 because of internal system readiness and other technical factors, according to K. Sivan, the chairman of the Indian Space Agency ISRO. Sivan added that the launch of India's Chandrayaan-2 lunar mission is scheduled for a launch by the end of April on a GSLV Mark III rocket. And now Japan. A Japanese startup plans to launch a sounding rocket this spring as it works on an orbital launch vehicle. Interstellar Technologies said it expects to launch its Momo rocket, capable of sending 10 kilograms to an altitude of 100 kilometres, in the near future. The company's previous suborbital launch attempts have ended in failure. Interstellar Technologies says it will work with JAXA on the development of its Zero small orbital launch vehicle, slated to make its first launch in 2022 or 2023. And in other Japanese space news, Japan's Hayabusa 2 spacecraft will attempt to fire a projectile at the asteroid Ryugu next month. The spacecraft will drop the projectile, which contains explosives and a small copper impactor, onto the surface on April the 5th. The projectile is intended to reveal material below the surface of the asteroid, which the spacecraft may attempt to later collect. The impact site is several hundred metres from the location where Hayabusa 2 touched down last month to collect samples. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Mike. Boeing Commercial Crew Vehicle could be facing more delays. Industry sources claim that the uncrewed test flight of the CST-100 Starliner vehicle will slip from April to August, while the crewed test flight will be delayed from August to November. The specific reason for the delay isn't known, and Boeing declined to comment on the report. NASA plans to publish an updated schedule of commercial crew test flights this week. Boeing's uncrewed flight was widely expected to slip by some degree given the lack of clear preparations for the mission and other vehicles scheduled to visit the International Space Station next month. Over to Blue Origin, and Blue Origin has big plans to expand its New Glenn rocket factory in Florida. Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos has filed plans for expanding its Florida rocket manufacturing facility onto a vacant 90-acre plot of land next door. The newspaper reported that plans for a south campus on Space Commerce Way near NASA's Kennedy Space Center are laid out in documents filed with the St. Johns River Water Management District. The land would be used to establish programs complementary to those constructed on the adjacent North Campus. Construction on the new site is due to begin in July, with the final building phase to be wrapped up a year from now. And Sierra Nevada's corporation Dream Chaser has passed the latest milestone in its NASA contract to deliver cargo to the ISS. The company said last week that it had passed Integrated Review Milestone 5, which involved tests of ground systems and the vehicle's flight software. The company said it now expects the first flight of Dream Chaser to the space station to take place in the spring of 2021. And finally this week, the US Postal Service has unveiled the stamps it will issue to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. One stamp includes a picture of the moon with the mission's landing site highlighted, while another features a picture of Buzz Aldrin on the lunar surface with Neil Armstrong, the photographer, captured in the reflection of Aldrin's visor. The Postal Service hasn't announced when the stamps will go on sale. Big year this year, 2019. Well, that's it for Space News this week. Thank you, Tina and Michael, and it's back to you, Andrew.